Pepper Bear.
Pepper Bear.
Come out here. Snow. Get snow. Yeah. Snow. Where you going? Brody's. Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel, Art Classes My Way. If you feel like you learned something or that you want to keep my channel going, please feel free to donate to my Patreon if you like. And if you guys have any ideas for rewards for the Patreon, please let me know. I really don't know what other artists give as rewards, so I'm always happy to hear that. So today's video is going to be going on knowing when you've going back, looking at some of your past pieces and maybe realizing that you did not do a very good job at it and redoing the piece. So here's a piece that I had done with some moss agate. This stone is something from a bolo tie, and somebody just hot glued it to a bolo tie. I got the tie for like $1, and then I just ripped this off of it. And this was pretty much what I came up with for a pendant, and to a point I kind of like it, but at the same time I can do better. This is a pretty old piece, so I'm going to go ahead and take this stone out. I will be trying to save as much as I can of my wire cage. You never know, maybe I'll have a use for this whole thing and in the future. And we have a very abstractly shaped piece of moss agate, and I do love moss agate. It's pretty cool stuff. Let us start anew. Now that he is free from his bonds, I'm going to take some wire here, and this is 20 gauge. I'm going to want this to be fairly delicate. He is a small piece, and because he's not very his sides aren't extremely pretty. He's a pretty roughly shaped. Even if he was shaped, he might just be a polished stone. He's not exactly attractive as far as shape goes. Now his coloring, gorgeous. We can't fault him for that. I'm thinking about doing a black accent here because of the black over in here. Now this is the side with the most black. You turn it over, it's not quite as beautiful. I like this side the best. It has the red and the black. And I think I'm going to use some black wire to kind of accent that. And because we're going with such a small 20 gauge wire, I'm going to use 30 gauge black. I've already gone ahead and cut my wire. So if you want to know how much wire to cut, basically you can take a piece of Scotch tape, wrap it around your stone, and either cut it or tear it, you know, where it touches, unravel it, and that's how much you need around. I always go overboard with how much I need to go around a piece because these are your decorative elements. All that extra ends up being the decorative touches and the frills. I've got one that's a little bit shorter than the other, so this is going to be extra cool. And pretty much from here you can find the middle multiple ways. I mean, you can measure it and find the middle and mark it, and I just like to put the two ends together, get a big approximation of where middle is down there. So that way when I start wire weaving these guys, I know where to start, so that way they have an even amount of decorative on both sides. And sometimes maybe I want it to be asymmetrical a little bit more, so that might end up, you know, one of these guys gets cut, so on. You never know. And so there's my middle, and I want to get just a little bit of tape. Put these two together so that way they match. And I'm going to start with this half here. Just tape all that together. Now, because of the edge on this, you know, it's not a very pretty edge. What I'm going to do is a piece where I'm going to wire weave a good chunk of this, and I'm going to try to bring it around and make it look nice and round, so that way the edge of this wire, instead of forming it and shaping it to every nook and cranny and corner, the edge of this wire helps to make this edge look a little bit better. Now for the fun part. going to go ahead and do the weave as soon as I find an end. There we go. Now, whenever you are doing your wire weaving, you can choose whatever size wire you want. If you wanted to go with 18 gauge for this, I wouldn't recommend it. Your wire is going to end up overpowering the smaller piece. A good rule of thumb, the smaller the piece is, then the smaller the wire you might want to use, so that way you don't, because the stone is supposed to be the focal point. It's supposed to be the beautiful part. Your wire is just accenting these kinds of stones. So I try to make the wire weave a little bit smaller. I don't go super duper, over the top necessarily, because I want this to stand out. And especially since we got a lot of neutral colors, and I got copper wire that's pretty neutral. Black isn't a neutral color, but it's still, it's unless it's against something that shows off black, black kind of blends back behind, and it's sophisticated and understated in a way. And also, I like to use rocks like this. One, a lot of you guys find rocks out in the wilds, and you want to use them to do wire weave. So there are no holes on this guy. Again, he was a bolo tie centered piece. And if you don't know what a bolo tie is, it's like one of those cowboy things that goes around your neck, and then you tighten it up with, like, say this stone would be on the clasp, and then you tighten it up, and then you just got two leather tongs coming down from the bottom. That's a bolo tie. And I like to use natural rocks. I mean, these the beautifully shaped pieces, like for instance this guy that I got in a bag here, they lend themselves to a larger variety of things. You can leave the edges nice and exposed to the outside. You don't need to put it in a cage all the time. It allows for more versatility, but these tend to be a little bit more complex and sometimes a little bit more fun. So kind of makes you think a little bit instead of just always going the easy way. Honestly, I rarely ever use even a hole, even when it's there. I do tend to find that holes that are pre-put into a piece, they always end up being too big or too low, and obviously you can't make this go any higher or you're going to end up chipping the top of it and you're going to lose your teardrop shape. But I'd just rather not have the hole at all. I like the challenge. So I'm going to take this black wire and I'm going to give myself a good long tail, because I can start weaving this direction once I get this direction figured out. And I'm going to choose a relatively simple little weave, and as I go, a lot of the imperfections in the wires are going to smooth themselves out. So, and away we go. I'm going to go around this guy, use the tried and true weave that I just like using it. No real particular reason behind it, just I like this weave. And I'm gonna go, well, let's see here. We'll start off from here and I'll tell you what I'm doing. So I go around this one, then I go along the back, and then I come around this one, and then I go along the front and come back around this one. So then it ends up being a short along in the back, a short along in the front, a short long in the back, and a short. So, and you can use whatever method you want to. And as I go, and I want the black to be the front, the most black up front there, because that's my favorite part. And I'm just gonna kind of go around, and as I go, I'll probably bend this around with, just so that way I know where I'm gonna meet at the top. And so that's pretty much that. So I will go ahead and weave all this guy off and weave in the other direction, and I'll see you guys soon. All right, we got our ribbon done here, and I'm gonna go around. Now I'm probably gonna want, it feels heavier right here because you have pretty much all the blacks on the bottom, and turning it sideways kind of feels a little off. So if there's an up and down to the stone, I'm going to say it's along this part right here. So I'm going to start. You pick the best side of your weave that you have, if there is a best side, and I'm going to just go around trying to get the vague shape going. Clearly I just went completely silly with how much weaving I wanted to do. I just didn't realize I needed to stop much sooner. So that way these guys meet at the top, in the middle. And I always find it easiest if you're not working with a stone with nice flat sides on it. I find it easiest to pretty much lay the piece down on a flat surface and then start shaping to whatever irregular shape you currently have. And that ought to do for the time being. I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap because there are some areas I would like to shape better. But once the piece is all together, that's when it's going to be easiest to shape to. So then I can get more detail, and then that ends up giving me a little bit more slack, which then allows me to come a little bit closer up in here. Our outer edge. So I'm going to undo some of this weaving that I've done. Now, just to mention, because I did forget to go over it while I was recording this, now you did see me tape this end together over here, and took my wire, started the weave. Now, for all of you beginners out there that don't know how to go this direction, because clearly I did not have enough wire to do all this, I just left myself a tail about that long. What I typically do from there is once I get one side done, I untape it, and then I use the rest of my tail. I try to use as much as of the tail to go ahead and start weaving this direction. Then you just get a new wire and you give yourself a little bit of tail. Try to end your weave somewhere in between wires, so that way when you cut your tail off when you don't need it anymore, it's nice and hidden and tucked away safely inside of your wires, so that way it can't snag on anything or get pulled or unravel on you, or whoever purchases your piece. And you just pretty much go in there and you just start weaving like nothing ever happened, like that wire was always there. And then once you get done, then you can cut off all your little tails nice and close with your nippers, and make sure that you feel around. This is where you're going to want to use the only time you really want to use the tips of your nippers is to get down inside of there as much as you can without actually cutting any of your weave, and get that little wire off, feel around, make sure that you don't feel anything poking, and then it's ready to go. So to continue onwards from here, now I got this, whoop, helps if you put it together the right way. Make sure that you can get your weave nice and tight, sliding him down, make sure he doesn't slide up on you. And I'm going to give myself a little bit more room. So I'm going to come up in here and just kind of undo what I did when I rolled these ends to begin with. Just a little bit at a time. All right. And just because for the shits and giggles of it, I'm going to go ahead and tape this together so that way I'm not fiddle farting around with it. I hate fiddle farting. It's a waste of time. I got the bottom in there where I want it. Put the tape on the stone, and this is just masking tape. It's a slight bit stickier than like stage tape, you know, what actors use to mark their little areas on stage and whatnot. Just gets to the point where you want an extra set of hands. Yep, make sure he's in the middle, not to one side or the other as much. There we go. Now that side's anchored, come in here, get this guy nice and tight against, and wha-bam. Now, it's not super tight. You can still even come in and shape a little more if you wanted to, but now I can focus on the top here and get this to be where it is actually going to mind. Because I want these to be nice and close together, about like that. So I can undo some more of this weave here, because I don't need all that extra. I can use it for something else, but now that I've gotten that all done, pretty much by unweaving this, it did work hard in my wire to the point where it snapped and messing around with it. So this is pretty much the only tail I have left up here, and in that case, or that being the case, I'm going to go ahead and take it and I'm going to use it to kind of lash these together. So it came from the middle of these two, came around the bottom, and bringing it up then between these two, and then kind of just tie them together a little bit. And if you need to, you can always get your round nose pliers out to grab and, you know, do some of that weaving if you're having a hard time getting your fingers in there. That will help out. Now, the smaller your wire gets, pretty much the easier it is to work harden it. So always keep that in mind. I do plan to use up the extra bits, and I will show you what I'm going to do with them as soon as I get a little further along. I like to do this until I really can't do it anymore. It's too short even for the round nose, and then I'll come in and nip it in between a pair of wires. I got my two longest wires here. I'm going to bring them up out of my way, and I think what I want to do, get this down a little snugger, I'm going to take one of my short wires, and pretty much it's whatever one you choose to do, and I'm going to bring it around. I'm going to just start making this whole top area look a little better, a little woven, and it'll cover up the areas where my black didn't end up, you know, when I unwove it and then it broke off and then I didn't have enough to reweave it back. I can just kind of do that and around. And they've got a little gap there. I don't want that there, so I'm going to take my square nose, I'm going to use the corners, and I'm just going to squeeze that together. There we go. That looks 100% better. And I can even use, as long as I have that around, I can even use my square nose to kind of set it more upright looking. There we are. There. Looking nice. Now, obviously this stone can't sit inside of this yet. If I take this tape off, it'll just fall away because this ribbon I've made is pretty thin. That's all right. We will get to that. That's what these guys are all for. Let's see. I'm going to go about, let's stop on the third one, and we will turn this guy 90-degree angle upright. Yeah, a little bit further over. Yeah. Now he's all the way over there, but that's okay. Use my square nose to straighten out the part that I want straightened, so that way he's 90. And I'm I'm going to just come in here, squish a little closer, and squish. Let me double check what is my front and what is my back of my stone. Trying not to make any marks with my tools on my wire. It's always something to be very careful of. All right, there we are. Bring you guys off this direction, out of my way. Now I'm going to go ahead and make pretty much the hoop for this guy to become a necklace. I'm going to bring this guy, which is the other short one. Now he's the next longest of the bunch. And just bring him around a little bit in front of where I turn this guy up 90 degrees. And then turn him upwards as well. Okay. Now, I mean, I didn't pull him tight around, because if you pull him tight, then you're just going to pull this guy up and you're going to get a bigger gap over here. Don't want that. Just brought it around, and it gives it a kind of a neat little crisscross there. And I don't want it to be too wide. I'm going to kind of separate these guys just a little bit from each other. And if you feel that, like, you can see how this is kind of weavy, wonky, I'm going to go in with my square nose just with the end and lightly squeeze to straighten out some of those areas so I have nice straight wire. There, that looks better. And if it's, for instance, I don't want this to be rounded, come rounded and then come up. I want it to be nice and straight from the get-go. So just come down here and give it some squeezes. Give it some little love. A little attention. There we go. That looks better. And just go ahead and narrow it. There. All right. And I'm just taking my thumb, and keep in mind, this is also going to work hard in your wire. Just about any movement you do, any repositioning, touching that you do is work hardening your wire, bringing it closer to its breaking point. But I'm just taking it, putting it through my finger and going through. You can feel it's not terribly straight. You can feel all the little kinks from where I wove it, but it'll work just fine for what I'm going to do here. And I gave myself a little bit of tail in there, and just hook it around, hold him down, and I'm going to go ahead and start the exact same weave I did up these sides here, with one exception. Well, first you got to wrap it around 3 times. The exception this time is going to be that I'm going to leave these further apart, so that way it'll start spanning that gap. So got it around 3 times, and then around the back, along the front, around the side, along the back, along the front, along the back. Now make sure you don't pull, you don't want to pull too tight, because then you'll end up pulling these together before you want them to probably be pulled together. I got a pretty light hand at this, again, so I don't pull these together by accident. Now I'm going to end that little tail right there, because clearly I'm out of wire. And I'm just going to wrap him around a couple of times. There. And get myself a longer, much longer piece. Now you wouldn't want to do this with a whole bunch of little short pieces, I'll tell you that. That'll end up, especially when you're spanning these larger, wider gaps, that's going to ruin your piece. So give yourself a little tail, wrap around, and 2 times. So as you can see, we're starting to span that gap. And it is very important, I feel, that when you're doing basically like a web, that you wrap around once first, then you can span across, wrap around completely, then you can span across, wrap around completely, then span across. You can, if you want to, do a figure 8, but typically it starts out looking pretty good, but then the further and further you get, the more it acts like a spring, and less you're going to like it, and the less it wants to behave. So that's why I make sure whatever weave I end up doing where I'm trying to span a gap, that the wire at least wraps around 1 time before I come over and across. And I do have a whole video on that if you want to go and check that out, making webbing with wire. And I don't want to go too far because this is just for, you know, the necklace to go underneath. We don't need it to be gigantic ribbon. Shimmy, shimmy. And one could say that if you're having to pull really tight to get the wire in the position that you want it to be in, if you pull really tight with 30 gauge wire, it's going to snap on you, regardless if it's work hardened or not. But one could argue that even just pulling tight, just doing a regular weave like what we were doing here, that you might be using the wrong size wire for the job. You might be using a wire that's too big for what you're doing, because it is important, and I'm guilty of it. Everybody's guilty of it, of being too tight in your weave. So just keep that in mind. It's kind of like when you're learning to draw and everybody feels like, oh well, I'm just gonna push down harder to make a dark color or dark shading or what have you, or even using the shader exclusively to do your shading. That's a big no-no. At least I feel a lot of the time, because what's the point of making all those beautiful lines? But anyway, I digress. But yeah, it's one of the big sins of being a wire weaver, as a lot of us, we weave too tight, and then things just tend to go wrong that way. So my technique to try to keep myself from weaving too tight, 1, I always keep it in mind as I'm going, and 2, if I have to pull too tight to get it into the position I want it to be in, it might be because it might be that I'm using a wire that's too big for what I wanted, for the weave job that I'm currently doing. So I'm going to bring these guys back in, so you kind of got, you know, a little shape there. And this is where it might want to get springy on you, so I'm going to tuck it down nice and tight. I'm going to put my pointer finger right behind here, and I'm kind of pushing with my thumb to push it against there to keep them down, more or less where I want them to be. And I can start closing. Now you don't want to just weave and then push to this point, because by the time you push down, the span that you cross up here, if you end up pushing it down and it really ends up being way down here, well, there's not enough wire. And wire doesn't want to just slip like a thread. You gotta keep in mind we are messing with metal. So I just go 1 around, slide down. And I'm just going to go ahead and wrap this guy around and end him and get a new wire. This guy ought to take care of the last of it and then some. Now these guys are nice and close together again. I can just go back to doing my regular weave. Got our little tail there, so I'm going to go in there and nip that off. Now I have all this little black left. There's not a whole lot of it left. So I think I'm just going to wrap this guy here. And that's just round and round and round and round. Now you don't want to do what I just did all the way up the piece, because then you're going to end up with a bunch of slack. I'll show you an extreme example here. So let's say I want to push this closer. You see all that slack that just happened? So you can do, you can wrap it really fast for very short distances. And then scooch and wrap and scooch. Now when I do this, I don't have a death grip on my wire. It is actually spinning in my fingers as I go round and round like this. That helps to keep from work hardening your wire and gives you a more working life with it. Buddy, all right. And just go ahead and round this guy. Folded this guy over, brought it around, and now I have more wire to spin about. And curl this. And bring him through. Now, if you're wondering how, since I didn't cover this whole thing, how do I finish this and make it look like, well, I just didn't stop there? As long as you disrupt line of sight, which is what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring this guy around. And I'm going to kind of give it a curl right there in front of it. And it's a really easy, simple way to hide something or disrupt line of sight. Let's think of something cool. I don't want to put like a curlicue or anything. Little boring that way. Maybe I'll just leave it like that, and then I'll bring this guy around instead. And I will bring it around, going same direction. But I want him to be underneath. I don't want him to be on top of this, the black coiling I did, because otherwise, then why did I even do it? What was the point if I'm just going to hide it? And I got a little spot here I want to fill in. Now be careful when you're playing around with colored wire. It may say permanently coated. That does not mean what you think it means. Or what it seems like it should mean. Anyway, whoop, underneath. Have him kind of follow. And we're going to go a different direction here. Now here's where we can actually start to make this stone stay put. I'm trying to rub that out. That's a little kink, little hump that I don't want there. that will help hold in. And I think I'm going to take some of the tape off. So that way I don't accidentally, by the time I get done doing the decorative elements, which are also going to be what holds this stone into the pendant, I don't end up accidentally making it to where I can't get my tape off because it's all underneath the decorative elements. Just help me hold him in place for now. All right, and now for the fun part. Oh, it's all fun. We all know the truth. Let's see here. Now, if I bring these two kind of around like so, we can get a pretty cool little Art Nouveau kind of a look. And I'm staying down near the ends of the wires because then I can control a lot of things a little bit more as far as like curling these bits, because we pretty much left this untouched. It's not been work hardened. It's nice and soft. It has no pre-established notions of where it should be, because wire does have a memory. Always keep that in mind. I want this to have a little bit bigger area, like a little bit, yeah, like a bigger hump right there. And I'm going to bring one of these guys up and around, following this first wire I did. And I could even possibly weave these guys together, but I like the little bit more open appearance. And I'm just going to round this a little bit. Although I will have to tack it down regardless of what I do. Anyway, it's going to probably end up tacking the two together right there up at the top. And then this guy's going to come round the side. Give this guy a little bit more curl there. There we go. Now, I do hate to go across the face of this because there's so very little of it that's super duper appealing, I guess. Well, I got a big idea where I want that guy in the front, so I'm going to come along the back here, and I want this guy to kind of follow these three fellows, but we're going to veer off last second, and when I tie these all down, they'll stay together a little better then. But have him over here, and then I can tack him down to this corner, maybe even, and I'm putting my thumb down here because I don't want any of that part to change, so I can bring this up like so, follow everybody else. Fold him around up there. Just kind of very lightly, just a little peekaboo, like so. Rolling back over, and then I can imitate this again. Hold it down and let it follow. Roll. I think it went, yeah, a little further over than I was hoping. So, whoop, not like that. Come on. There we go, there. So let's tack some of that down. I'm pretty happy with it. Get a decent length of my weaving wire. And first place I want to tack down is going to be right in here. So let's do these two fellows up on the shoulder. Now this is where you, more than likely, you're going to waste some wire doing the tacking down, because you're going to have to leave yourself enough tails to be able to grab a hold of things and move things and such. Like I just didn't do. Bare minimum, you want to go 3 around, but with such a very dainty, delicate wire, I'm at least going to go around 6. It'll give it a little bit more sense of weight, and when you do this, you don't want these wires to overlap. You want them to look nice and neat. As they lay down all beside each other in little rows. Put my fingernail here so that way it only has one choice, but to lay down beside. And we're going to wrap him around. Got that wrapped around there. Now it's just a matter of what we did before. I'm going to come up, and I'm making sure to hold him and where I want him to be in all of this. So that way where I'm lashing him down, because of this texture, this wire is going to catch that texture and keep him from sliding around on us and keep him exactly where we want him to be. Except we also got to keep our thumb on that too. So as you can see, got this guy all tacked down where I want him to, up here, over here, right here, these two together, and I went ahead and lashed this guy down over here. Now as far as this wire that hadn't done anything with yet, and he holds himself, I could push him out of there if I really wanted to. Not 100% there yet, but we are very close, and it's far sight better than how it originally started, and I tell you what. Sometimes you just got to recognize when your old work's just not good enough and to undo something and just start over. So I took this wire, I put a little copper bead on there just for giggles. I really didn't want to go through the black, but if I went all the way down to the bottom, it still felt like, it takes too much, you know, coming downwards. So I went ahead and wrapped it around. It did go through the black, sadly enough. Brought it around to the side and have been following these guys here, and I think I'm going to tack him down in this area, and then we're going to go up and I'm going to kind of lean him off in this direction. There are two ways that we could put this in, or at least two directions we can go. We can either try to clip this end, and then that'll hold him in there pretty good, or we can try to clip and grab a hold of this end. I'm going to go for this side myself because there's less of the black going on over here that I wanted to try to emphasize with using the black wire and so on. So I'm going to go to this side. I just don't like this little area right here. It almost looks, I mean, this is a natural stone, but this looks like there's a daisy or something stuck in there, like a bad print off of a daisy. So I'm going to just go ahead and kind of semi end up covering that up instead. And and got that where I want it. Oop. Pretty much hold it where I want it. My finger around there. And come around and kind of eat this little corner here. Let's see where it comes over. All right. And then we can round this part, come up, around, up in here, and we'll just give it a little curl. Like so. Kind of form this to this copper wire so that way it's all nice and neat, pretty. There. There we go. Now I just got to tack that down. And to do this one, again, I'm going to tack these two together here. Probably going to tack this one down, and look at all that extra I just got. Can push this in, so I'll have to tack this guy. So that's 3 more areas that I got to tie or sew or whatever terminology you want to use for what I'm going to be doing. Myself and hopefully my last length of black wire. Now, as far as knowing where to tack something down, like what I'm talking about, to kind of anchor it into place, 3 instead of tacking. You don't have to do every single area. That's as far as being knowing when and where to do it. That 1 comes with time, and 2 also comes with experimenting. So back when I first started, I would have tacked every single area down. And a way to combat that, if you don't want to tack every single place down, is by, okay, well, I'll tack this area, and then I'll shake it around and see where it falls out or what moves too much. If I don't want it moving like that, then I'll tack that area down. And so on, and just basically seeing what moves, how, and where by just doing something as simple as shaking it and trying to shake it out deliberately, or shake your stone out, or what have you, to see just what needs more work. I'd rather my tack down areas, at least for this piece, stay pretty much in the back as opposed to being in the front. I want the front to be a lot simpler and a lot cleaner, so that way you can see the, focus on the stone that's in there, not on the wire weaving, because we can make wire weaving projects with no stones at all, or maybe just using an acrylic or some sort of bead to make our like a pop of color. So why wire weave something when you're just when you're trying to show off the weave and not the piece that you're using, or at least spending a whole bunch of money on expensive stones. All right, that ought to be good enough. Scooch that down, and I want to wrap this end a few times. All right, now that's down, and 3. A 1, I think that looks pretty good overall. 3. And I don't necessarily need this corner down unless you are coming in here, popping it out, and you're going to have to warp this wire and this wire in order to slide him out this way. And why would somebody bother to buy your jewelry if that's what they're going to do with it? Unless they're taking it apart to figure out how you put it together. At which point you guys can just watch my videos for that. I would love it if you bought my stuff. I have an Etsy. Which this guy's probably going to end up on. See here, tack that down. Now I'm going to do, I think, instead, I'm just going to tack down just this one. And now we got him all done here. And you can see, you really can't see any place where I tacked him. The only places where he's been sewn down, they all stayed nice and around the back, which makes me quite happy. And it's a pretty simple little piece, and just something for you beginners out there, just beginning with your pendants and so on. And even for those of you who've been possibly doing this for a while, maybe sometimes some of those pieces that maybe haven't sold, or just older pieces, maybe it's time to revisit some of your first ones. You may not like them. Maybe it's time to just go back, revisit them, and give them something new to do, something new to be in. So I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. I have a Patreon if you would like to help my channel out and grow and get better supplies and stuff, so that way I can make you more videos. I'd also rather you guys go to my Etsy and get something for your money. I don't know, just asking for free money doesn't seem quite right, but you know, whatever. And this guy's probably going to be going up on Etsy as soon as I can find my driftwood that I normally photograph all my stuff, all my pieces on. I do hope you guys all had a wonderful day and that you enjoyed this piece. Please leave me comments down in the comments section. That is what it is for. Tell me about things that you would like to learn. And that is what this whole channel is about. It could be painting, it can be jewelry making, even Photoshop. I do that as well. I do watercolors and acrylics. I do have some acrylic paintings that are going to be coming up, so I do hope you guys enjoy those videos as well as my my jewelry smithing. Yeah. So I hope you all had fun. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me.